Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video we are going to take a look at some really cool tanks. These are the Aquascape tanks from the Aquatic Experience. They were in the Aquascape competition. We've kind of divided it up into three parts of the video. The first part are the nano tanks that were Aquascaped. The second part are the larger tanks, and then we have a little part at the end where it was the kids aquascaping contest, which was really awesome. One other thing, we finally got the website up and running, primetimeaquatics.com. We have the shirts available now. I know some of you have been asking for that for quite some time. We'll put that link in the description below. Hope you enjoy the video. Just take about 10-15 minutes, relax, enjoy the tanks, enjoy the artwork. Stay tuned. So here we go. We're going to start out with the smaller tanks. There were quite a few of them. This is tank number 1. I would really love to hear from you once again. What is your favorite tank? Leave that in the comments section below. So here we've got a tank that's got some black substrate. I like what's going on here. I really like the tanks that add fish and livestock. Here we've also got some snails. There are quite a few tanks that did this, but there were some that didn't. I guess I just appreciate the ones that add the fish. I think if I were running an aquascape competition, I would probably require that fish are added, just because I think it really helps the way the tank looks. Because that's one of the things I think is so fun when we look at some of these tanks. And here we have tank number 2. It's kind of cool to imagine what the fish are doing in these ecosystems, where they're going to be hanging out. I know as a child that was what I loved about fish tanks so much, is you imagine where they're going to go when you put new decorations in. Are they going to interact with them? Are they going to interact with the plants and the wood and the substrate? And so that can be pretty cool. And I'd really like to hear from you. What is your favorite tank? We've got the nano tanks, that's the first group, and then also from the large tanks. Put your vote down in the comments section below. I'd love to hear your opinion. I thought this was a pretty interesting tank. It's not very common anymore where you see tanks that are actually aquascaped with lava rock. A lot of times we see dragonstone, which is very awesome. But again, I appreciated this. I also really liked how the lava rock and the really nice lightly colored sand, how they play off of one another. It was a lightly planted tank, but you could imagine a situation as the tank ages and these plants grow in. It would be pretty interesting to look at. This is another great tank. Again, I love the choice of fish here. These rainbow fish are fantastic. They have a lot of nice color, and in person, it's a lot easier to see their features, their bright blue eyes, and their colorful fins. And the camera doesn't always do a good job of picking up on that. And again, you can see here how the fish are interacting with the planted tank, and that's just a really cool thing to see. This is another nicely planted tank, and I hope one of the things that we're noticing as we go through these tanks is, because they're so nicely aquascaped, we've got some fairly common fish, and the fish look really nice in these tanks. We're seeing white clouds and pork chop rasboras and neons, and even the rainbow fish are somewhat common, but it doesn't matter because they're fitting in well with the ecosystem, they're fitting in well with the aquascape, and it just makes it all that much more interesting. So here's tank number 6. We have a planted tank with some rock work. I like this tank. It's a little bit more simply aquascaped than some of the things that we've seen so far. But what I like about it is this is a tank that maybe some of us could accomplish. Probably not me, but maybe some of us could accomplish an aquascape like this where it's not super far out of reach. But I really like this. I like the use of the plants and how they're interwoven within the rocks. It's got a very natural look, more so than some of the other tanks that we've seen. The natural look in this tank, it's just a little bit more pronounced, which is something I really enjoy. And this tank is very interesting because it's quite different from everything we've seen so far. It's lightly planted, but then we've got this wood, and there's not a lot of plants or any plants really attached to the wood. The rocks are a little bit more of a natural feel. I like the use of rams here. They seem to be fit in pretty naturally with what was going on. There's some rainbow fish in here now. Of course, the rainbow fish, maybe that's not the best choice for a tank like this, just because there is no swimming space. But I do like the cherry barbs. I do like the rams. I think that was a nice addition. And here we have tank number 8. Different use of plants, and so I think that's pretty cool. The plants here are different from the tanks that we've seen so far and different from some of the tanks that we'll see coming up here. I also like the use of the rocks and the substrate and the fact that we have different size pebbles interacting with the substrate, which is kind of cool. Here we've got tank number 9. I like this wood. I like the way that it was put together, interwoven with the different pieces, which I thought was kind of interesting. I like the use of this substrate too. It looks very, very natural, kind of compacted, almost like a river sort of sand, which is different from, again, what a lot of other people were doing. This was an amazing aquascape. You can see there's just so much here to look at. I like the path. That was something that I've seen the last few years with different aquascapers doing that. And so this path right down the center is very interesting. And then of course we look at the rocks and how they are put together. It must take a long time and a lot of vision to put rocks together like this and have it flow the way that it does with the wood, with the aquascape. Just a fantastic looking tank. Here's another tank that I think is a little bit more lightly aquascaped. I like, once again, the path down the center. I can imagine that there would be fish swimming all around this area, and it would be pretty cool to watch them interacting with that more open space between the areas where there is more aquascaping, more wood, more plants. Unfortunately, this tank was really, really hard to get on camera. There was just so much reflection being a black water tank. Kind of interesting, very different from what a lot of other people were doing. One of the things I liked about this tank is it was more lightly aquascaped, and I think it's something that a lot of us could probably accomplish at home and not have a lot of upkeep to go along with it. I absolutely love this tank, tank number 14. It was very different from anything else that was there. The plants were kind of it was the overarching theme of this tank, which I really like. I like the plants at the top that just kind of hung over everything else. I'm happy that there are fish in this tank. I think they fit in really well with the aquascape. Lots of different plants. This is one of the tanks I spent a lot of time looking at because there were just so many features, and every time you look at this tank you'd see a little bit more detail. And again, this use of plants towards the top was very interesting. Another great looking tank. Love the use of the wood. Look at how it's all intertwined together, and a nice use of plants. A very cool looking tank. Would love to see fish interacting with this. And you can see that there are fish added in the upper and lower right hand corners, which is pretty cool. again, what I find most interesting about this tank was the use of the substrate and how it looked relative to the rest of the tank. I thought that was nice just because it had that natural feel to it, and I like the tanks that had that more natural feel to the substrate where it looked like it could be found in nature. Love the open space in this tank. There's a lot of room for fish to swim around. In some of the tanks, they're really nicely aquascaped, but it might be hard to actually include fish in some of those scapes. But this is one where there's enough open area, enough swimming space where we could have some fish in there and they would feel comfortable. Another great scape here, again with some nice open space for swimming, for some fish. You could imagine at the top. I really wish in this scape there could have been something swimming around. I think it would have been really interesting to look at. So now let's get into the larger tanks. There weren't nearly as many of the large tanks, but oh my goodness, were they cool. It really just, as you start to look at these tanks, you can see how a larger tank can bring in so many more options in terms of depth and setting up these micro ecosystems within the larger tank. It's just absolutely astounding what can be accomplished by people who are skilled at this. Now this tank didn't have any fish. I wish it would have, because there was enough swimming space here to really add something interesting to the tank in addition to the wood and the rocks and the plants and the substrate. I like the use of the plants. There was some different stuff going on here. Nice looking tank. Here's another one. I really like this. I like that kind of island feel where you've got the rocks and you've got the plants and the wood, and then there's a surrounding area where there's not as much going on. There's some open space here. It'd be really cool to see maybe some cory cats kind of doing their thing in the sandy area. And we've got fish in this tank, which is also pretty nice to see. Really cool tank. Love this one as well. I like the use of the plants, and they almost look like little mini rose bushes attached to the wood. And it was interesting because there were rosy barbs in the back of the tank. You can see here in the right hand side and also right below, which really went well with the plant selection here. It was more of a simple tank, but again, this is something where you could imagine it would be a little bit easier to maintain long term. This is a nice looking tank as well, a lot of open space. Looks like they used some pencil fish at the top, like the substrate color. I'm really enjoying this substrate color. There was a number of tanks, both the small and now here we've got the large that were using it. And what I enjoyed about it so much, once again, is that natural feel. You've got the rocks, you've got the wood coming out of the rocks, and I think that's kind of an interesting look. And of course, you've got the plants. This was an awesome tank to look at. It looked much better in person than it does on camera, but there was just so much going on with the plants and the rock work. You can see here we've got some shrimp kind of swimming around doing their thing, but every time you look at this tank, there's just something else here to look at. And I think that's what's so interesting about the tanks that we're seeing is when you really look at them, you pick up on some new little minor detail every time you walk by them. In my mind, there was one tank that was set apart from every other one. It was this one. This was by far my favorite tank in the entire aquatic experience. I look at this tank, I just see so much going on. I was so happy to see not only what was an amazing aquascape, but the fish. I think so many of us, this is why we started in the hobby, was to have a fish tank and to have fish swimming around in some type of a habitat. And they added a lot of fish. We've got some rasboras and some neons, and other fish are swimming around. And this tank is one of those tanks where you could sit here for hours and just watch the fish interact with the environment. And the environment that was created is so rich and so deep. This is, to me, it just ties everything together perfectly of the art that goes into aquascaping. And that's really what we're looking at. We're looking at a form of art in all of these tanks. And what's so cool about it is it's living art. We can see, you know, different types of life with the plants and invertebrates in some cases. And we've got the fish. Just an absolutely outstanding job of mixing in what I think is reflective of an ecosystem. It's something where you could imagine all of these different types of life just kind of hanging out and being very comfortable in their surroundings. Just an unbelievable tank. This I thought was awesome. They had the kids aquascaping contest. I love their imaginations. We never know. The kids that are doing this now could be setting up these larger tanks that we're just absolutely amazed by later in life. They had different age groups. I love the imagination that kids have. Just they do what they think is cool. They do what they think is fun, age appropriate. And I absolutely love looking at these tanks. So this was Aquatic Experience 2019. These were the aquascaping contests. Hope you enjoyed the video. We're going to have more Aquatic Experience videos out here pretty soon. If you did enjoy the video, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.